These are the headlines we're following at this hour. North Korea's second attempt at launching a spy satellite failed, with next attempt likely to come in October. South Korea immediately convened a National Security Council, condemning the North for violating UN Security Council resolutions. Japan is set to start releasing Fukushima wastewater at 1 p.m., saying the safety standards are satisfied. The 30-year-long procedure kicks off amid opposition inside and outside Japan. The Bank of Korea decides to hold its interest rate steady for the fifth consecutive time at 3.5% due to concerns over weakening investment consumption amid growing economic uncertainties. Good afternoon. Japan is set to proceed with its plan to release wastewater from the destroyed Fukushima nuclear power plant at 1 p.m. today. The decision comes after the plant operators gave the final go-ahead, given that the level of tritium meets the safety standards. For more, we're joined by Kim Jung-sil on the line. Jung-sil, tell us more about today's plan.
Well, Kyung-eun, in just 1 hour's time, the release will take place as planned, and that's, as you said, according to Tokyo Electric Power Company officials this morning. There, the officials said they took a liter of wastewater and mixed it with 1,200 tons of seawater on Tuesday to measure the concentration levels of tritium. The officials said the tritium concentration was lower than Japanese government standard of 1,500 becquerels per liter. The officials also explained that the weather is good today, which allows them to monitor the released wastewater. The officials said due to these reasons, they will proceed with the release in just about an hour. Today, since the release process begins at around 1 p.m., TEPCO said it plans to release around 200 to 210 tons for the day. But from now on, within a 24-hour window, around 460 tons of wastewater will be released into the ocean. If all goes as planned, TEPCO plans to release 7,800 tons of wastewater over the next 17 days.
I see. Now, what is the reaction in and outside Japan?
Well, I want to start with Japan. There's been an NHK survey of 2,500 people in Japan this month, with 53% of respondents thinking the release is appropriate. 30% said it's inappropriate, and 17% said they don't know or didn't respond. But Japan's fisheries industry is still strongly against the release, saying it would put their livelihoods in danger. Hong Kong has announced Tuesday it will ban Japan seafood starting today. China is one of the countries protesting strongly against Japan. On Tuesday, its vice foreign minister summoned the Japanese ambassador to China and strongly complained. China also said Japan's decision is, quote, selfish and irresponsible for putting neighbor countries in danger of nuclear contamination. South Korean Prime Minister Han Duck-soo said the South Korean government will file a lawsuit against Japan if the safety of the release becomes compromised. Regarding fears for seafood, Prime Minister Han said the government will come up with all possible measures until the public feels safe. Finally, the main opposition, the Democratic Party of Korea, and some civic groups remain strongly against the release. They claim the release will threaten future generations and is an environmental crime. That's all I have for this hour. Back to you, Kevin.
Thank you, Jung-sil, for that. Early this morning, North Korea made its second attempt at launching its first spy satellite, which also ended up in failure. South Korea immediately convened a National Security Council meeting condemning the North for violating UN Security Council resolutions. Our North Korean affairs correspondent Lee Dae-yeon has more.
Pyongyang's second attempt to put a satellite in orbit took place at around 3:50 a.m. on Thursday. The North Korea Central News Agency said that the flight's first and second stages of the rocket were normal, but during the third stage, it failed due to an error in the emergency blasting system. The North Korean National Aerospace Development Administration said it will explain the reason for the error soon, adding that a third attempt will likely come in October. Multiple Japanese news outlets said that Japan's Coast Guard had earlier presumed that the launch could have been a ballistic missile, adding that it separated into pieces which landed in the West Sea, East China Sea, and the Pacific Ocean near the Philippines. South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff said that it detected the rocket flying above international waters off the Korean peninsula's west coast after its launch from the northwestern Dongchangri area where the main space launch center is located.
South Korea will continue high-intensity Seoul-Washington joint military drills while closely monitoring Pyongyang's further actions.
Seoul's military officials also said they are currently in the process of retrieving the satellite body and the wreckage that has fallen in the West Sea. Meanwhile, officials from the Southeast Defense Ministry and other related officials attended the National Security Council meeting at around 6 a.m. Members of the council strongly condemned the launch and said that it clearly violates the UN Security Council resolutions. President Yoon Suk-yeol also ordered officials to brace for any additional provocations by North Korea and share the analysis result with Washington and Tokyo. He also asked to promptly carry out what had been pledged in the Camp David Trilateral Summit earlier, such as sharing missile alert information in real time and strengthening defense ties for missile provocations. U.S. State Department also agreed that the failed launch was a violation of the UN Security Council resolutions and urged Pyongyang to stop illicit and threatening activities. Washington also added that it still pursues dialogue without preconditions with North Korea. Lee Dae-hyun, Arirang News.
Since Monday, South Korea and the U.S. have been conducting joint urban warfare drills as part of the Ilji Freedom Shield exercise. The training is focused on engaging and responding tactically in real-life war scenarios in urban settings. Our defense correspondent Choi Min-jung was at the site.
Let's go, go, go! Go, 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 go! Come on, Lee!
A fierce battle unfolds in a small mocked-up town in Paju, Gyeongsang-do Province. Soldiers of the South Korean and U.S. armies infiltrate a building and take positions to target the enemy. This is a joint urban warfare drill taking place at a training center that looks very much like the cities people live in here in South Korea. It's part of Seoul and Washington's Freedom Shield exercise, which kicked off on Monday. Soldiers are taking part in offensive and defensive operations despite the heavy rain for over 5 days.
This joint urban operation training was a valuable opportunity to verify Seoul and Washington's interoperability as one unit.
A total of 500 South Korean and U.S. soldiers are participating in the exercise day and night, using lasers and blank cartridges to stimulate actual battles. Various military assets were also deployed, including the U.S. Stryker armored vehicle. Despite the language barrier and bad weather, soldiers from both countries were able to cooperate and complete the mission together.
I can tell you everyone in my platoon had a great time working with the ROK Army. They've been incredibly professional. They really understand how we work together, and we had a great week out here this week.
South Korea's army has vowed to develop urban exercises suitable for future use in real-world scenarios by further improving combined arms training. Choi Min-jung, Arirang News.
Last week saw a historic summit between South Korea, the U.S. and Japan that agreed to bolster the trilateral security mechanism. Regarding the summit, the U.S. ambassador in Seoul highlighted that it is not a legally binding alliance like NATO, but a political agreement based on strong commitments. Our foreign affairs correspondent Pei Eun-ji explains what that means.
The U.S. ambassador to South Korea, Philip Goldberg, says the commitment to consult, which outlines Seoul, Washington, and Tokyo's commitment to coordinate their responses to regional threats, is not a binding agreement. While meeting reporters on Wednesday afternoon at his residence in Seoul, he stressed that Camp David is not a new NATO. He explained that it's not a duty nor a military alliance between South Korea and Japan, but rather a cooperative step where the three countries can interact when there are common threats.
So you can think of it more as a political agreement than a legally binding agreement.
When asked if the commitments made at Camp David will last even after elections, he said the interactions that will take place in the next several months will make it an enduring relationship, regardless of the political factors in each country.
It has a very strong commitment from the three leaders. In the case of the United States, there's a tremendous bipartisan agreement, of which isn't all that common in our political life, in support of this.
As for the possibility of the second trilateral summit taking place in Seoul, he said the invitation by President Yoon was well received, but refrained from confirming further details. He also highlighted President Yoon's role in bringing the three countries together by taking forward-looking policies and leadership to improve relations between Seoul and Tokyo. He added that while this relationship is very important to Washington, it depends on the people and the leaders of the two countries, and that it's not something the U.S. can and would resolve. Since taking office in May last year, President Yoon has been working to restore ties with Japan by resolving historical disputes, such as the issue of compensating the Korean victims of wartime forced labor during Japan's colonial rule, before and during World War II. Meanwhile, as for the issue of Japan's plan to release wastewater from the destroyed Fukushima nuclear power plant, the ambassador said the U.S. and South Korea's positions align, adding that Japan has followed the internationally accepted process. 배은지, Arirang News.
The Bank of Korea decides to hold its interest rate steady for the fifth consecutive time at 3.5% due to concerns over weakening investment and consumption amid growing economic uncertainties. Our finance correspondent Shin Ha-young reports.
As widely expected, the Bank of Korea announced another freeze, keeping its key interest rate at 3.5%. The decision was made on Thursday following a Monetary Policy Committee meeting.
Inflation is slowing down, but considerable amount of time will be required for it to stabilize at the target level. Considering rising economic uncertainties and the need to closely monitor household debt, we have decided to keep our tightened monetary policy. The Board of Governors voted unanimously to maintain the current tightening stance.
This is the fifth consecutive time that the BOK has decided to keep the rate unchanged. The base rate has been held at 3.5% since February, following 10 consecutive rate hikes to tame inflation beginning in August 2021. The BOK's latest decision came amid concerns over rising economic woes in China with a deepening real estate crisis in the country. Due to these factors, an economic recovery for South Korea in the latter half of 2023, as initially anticipated by the government, has become more uncertain. The latest decision reflects the central bank's intention to monitor the situation rather than imposing a hike, which could further weaken people's spending and investment. In fact, while the growth rate for the second quarter is higher than that of the first quarter, by sector, private consumption, exports, imports, investments, and even government spending have slowed down. Meanwhile, despite the economic slowdown in China, as well as a decline in South Korea's exports, the BOK on Thursday maintained its economic growth outlook for this year at 1.4%. Consumer price growth is expected to be at 3.5%. South Korea's consumer price index, a key gauge of inflation, has been cooling down. In July, it rose by 2.3% compared to the same month last year. This is the smallest increase in over 2 years and marks the 6th month in a row that the rise on year has fallen. But there are still lingering factors that could raise prices, such as geopolitical risks and other accumulated pressures, such as higher public utility fees. Due to the BOK's latest decision, the rate gap between South Korea and the U.S. now stands at 2 percentage points. The widening rate gap, soaring household debt, and rising exchange rate between the Korean won and the U.S. dollar mean it may be some time yet before the central bank considers rate cuts. Shin Ha-young, Arirang News.
Wholesale prices in South Korea edged up by 0.3% on month in July, increasing for the first time in 4 months. According to the Bank of Korea on Thursday, the producer price index for agricultural and fisheries products increased by more than 4% a month. The prices for agricultural goods jumped by more than 10% from June due to torrential downpours and heat waves. Petroleum-based products were also up by 3.7% from the month before due to higher oil prices. Yevgeny Prigozhin, the leader of the Russian private military group Wagner, is believed to have died in a plane crash, with the exact cause of the accident yet to be known. This comes about 2 months after Prigozhin led a mutiny against Moscow. Lee Si-hoo has the details.
The Russian paramilitary group Wagner's chief Yevgeny Prigozhin was on the list of passengers aboard a plane that crashed on Wednesday. Russia's Emergency Situations Ministry said that all 10 people aboard the plane were killed. The private plane was traveling from Moscow to St. Petersburg. Prigozhin, 62, founded and led the Wagner group, which rose to prominence in the Russian invasion of Ukraine. The group, which includes fighters recruited from prison, led the attack on the Ukrainian city of Bakhmut and claimed to have seized the city in late May this year. But there were clashes between the group and Russia's military. In late June, Prigozhin began a rebellion and claimed that Wagner had taken control of all military facilities in the key Russian city of Rostov-on-Don. The group continued to march on Moscow but stopped upon Prigozhin's orders. Prigozhin claimed he called off his march to save, quote, Russian blood, and his group was allowed to retreat to Belarus. But Vladimir Putin hours earlier had said that those responsible would suffer punishment, accusing Prigozhin of treason.
What we are facing now is treason. Unreasonable ambitions and personal interests lead to treachery, state treason, and the betrayal of our own people.
There are rising suspicions about the cause of the fatal plane crash.
Yes, would Putin have done this? Well, he has certainly the Russian security forces have a history of poisoning people at home and abroad, and political opponents or people that Mr. Putin has previously called traitors.
U.S. President Joe Biden on Wednesday told reporters that he was not surprised by the news.
There's not much that happens when Russia is Putin not behind, but I don't know enough to know the answer.
Russia's Federal Agency for Air Transport has launched, quote, a specially created commission to investigate the crash. Lee Si-hu, Arirang News.
India has made history becoming the first country ever to reach the moon's south pole. That is an area thought to contain water ice, which is a critical resource for future exploration, like providing drinking water and producing rocket fuel. Lee Sing-jae has more.
India is now just the fourth country after the United States, China, and the former Soviet Union to land a spacecraft on the moon after its Chandrayaan-3 spacecraft successfully touched down on the lunar surface on Wednesday. What made this latest lunar landing all the more special for India is that the unmanned spacecraft became the first to reach the moon's South Pole region. This is significant in that the South Pole region of the moon is considered an area of key scientific and strategic interest for spacefaring nations, with scientists believing that the area could have water ice deposits. And that could eventually be used to make rocket fuel or even drinking water for future crewed missions. Having watched the landing virtually, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, who's currently in South Africa for the BRICS summit, praised the lunar landing, saying that the success belongs to all of humanity, as it will help moon missions by other countries in the future. People in India took to the streets to celebrate, with people dancing, waving Indian flags, setting off firecrackers, and playing drums following the breakthrough mission. And following Chandrayaan-3's successful 384,400-kilometer trip, it's expected to remain functional for 2 weeks, running a series of experiments. This includes a spectrometer analysis of the mineral composition of the moon's surface. Lee Sing-jae, Arirang News.
BTS members are continuing to make waves on the Billboard Hot 100 as V's first solo single has also made it onto the chart. The track Love Me Again from V's first solo album Layover, which is set to be released on September 8th, ranked in 96 on Tuesday's chart. The song has already seen some success earlier this month, topping both Billboard's World Digital Song Sales and the Hot Trending Song chart. This means all 7 BTS members have now made the Billboard Hot 100 chart with official solo singles. A naming contest is underway for twin baby pandas born in South Korea last month. According to Everland, the country's largest theme park where the panda twins were born, those who wish to participate can make suggestions on its social media platforms, including the official YouTube channel. A total of 4 name pairs will be selected and put to online and offline votes. The final names will be announced in October. In the meantime, the twins will go by Dongbao and Sangbei, named after Korean word 동생, which refers to a younger sibling in Korean.
Good afternoon. Unlike yesterday, eastern parts of the country are being drenched with heavy rainfall. In fact, Gyeongsang-do Provinces and surrounding regions will be hit the hardest by the rain, with more than 200 millimeters of downpours expected, along with strong winds. So heavy rain warning remains in place in Busan and parts of Gyeongsang-do Provinces, and Jeju are under a heavy rain advisory. Now, the southern coast of Gyeongsang-do Province could see 70 millimeters an hour of rain hammering down today. Afternoon highs in Seoul and most of western regions are a couple of degrees higher than Wednesday, Seoul topping out at 29 degrees Celsius, with on and off light showers expected in the west, while eastern regions have daytime highs that are 3 to 5 degrees lower along with rain. Daegu should notice a big drop from yesterday's 34 to 28 degrees Celsius this afternoon. We are getting so much rain this summer, and this band of rain lets up tomorrow morning. Then it will rain again early next week. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
Treated Fukushima wastewater will still include a radioactive substance called tritium. Tritium is a form of hydrogen and exists both naturally and artificially from things like nuclear power plant operation. Radiation emitted by tritium is unable to penetrate the skin, but it can enter your human body as a liquid when it reacts with oxygen to become tritiated water. They can be found in the air, ocean, tap water, and food. Studies show our body ejects tritium in 10 days, and scientists largely agree on a negligible health impact unless you're exposed to a large amount, which could potentially lead to cancer or affect the brain. While making sure tritium in the Fukushima wastewater remains at the negligible level is the key aim of the monitoring by the IAEA and South Korea. That is all for today. Thanks for watching.